How often do we consider the true cost of a roof over our heads? A thought-provoking question, isn't it? We tend to take for granted the stability and security that our homes provide. Yet for millions of middle-class Americans, the affordability of housing is a constant struggle, a hidden battle fought behind the closed doors of seemingly secure homes. Welcome to our exploration of the unseen battle, America's middle-class rent crisis. This is a topic that touches the lives of countless people, yet it often goes unnoticed and misunderstood. You might wonder, why is this struggle hidden? Well, the middle class, often seen as the backbone of the economy, is expected to be secure and comfortable. But the reality is far from this perception. The rising cost of living coupled with stagnant wages has made it increasingly difficult for middle-class families to keep up. Imagine earning the same pay year after year, while everything around you gets more expensive. The groceries, the gas, the school fees, and most importantly the rent. All these costs are rising, but your income, it remains the same. This is the reality for many middle-class Americans today. Then, there's the issue of gentrification. As cities grow and develop, neighborhoods are transformed, often leading to higher property values and consequently, higher rents. What happens to the middle-class families who have called these neighborhoods home for years, even decades? They are either forced to pay the increased rent or move out, leading to displacement and instability. The middle-class rent crisis is a complex issue with many contributing factors. But at its core, it's about people. It's about families who are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. It's about communities that are being torn apart by the rising cost of living. It's about the erosion of the middle class, a vital part of our society. In this video, we'll delve into the unseen battle of America's middle-class rent crisis. We'll look at its causes, its impacts, and most importantly, what can be done to address it. Because understanding the problem is the first step towards finding a solution. So, let's begin this journey together. Meet John and Jane Doe, a middle-class couple from San Francisco. They are your typical American family, working 9-to-5 jobs, raising 2 kids, and just trying to get by. But like many middle-class families in major cities, they're grappling with a challenging reality, the burden of rent. In the heart of San Francisco, where tech giants and venture capitalists roam, the cost of living has skyrocketed. But while Silicon Valley salaries have grown, the wages of ordinary folks like the Does have remained stagnant. They find themselves in a relentless tug-of-war with the cost of rent, a battle that seems to grow harder with each passing month. John and Jane are not alone in this struggle. They represent countless others who are caught in the crossfire of rising housing prices and stagnant wages. The struggle is not confined to San Francisco. It extends to Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, and countless other cities across the country. It's a story that is all too common, yet often unseen. Every month, John and Jane must make difficult decisions. Decisions that involve prioritizing necessities, cutting back on luxuries, and sometimes even dipping into their savings. They live with the constant anxiety of the next rent increase, the unease of living paycheck to paycheck, the fear of eviction. This is not a story of financial recklessness or irresponsibility. It's a story of systemic issues that have led to a widening gap between the cost of living and the average wage. It's a tale of a system that has failed to keep up with the times, leaving families like the Does in a precarious situation. John and Jane Doe are just another face in a sea of faces, another family trying to make it in an increasingly unaffordable world. They're not looking for handouts or charity, they're just looking for a fair shot, a chance to live comfortably without the threat of financial ruin hanging over them. The Doe's story is not unique. Across America, millions are grappling with the same reality. The burden of rent is a heavy one, and it's a burden that we must all bear in mind as we seek to address the challenges facing the middle class in America. Let's uncover the numbers behind the crisis. As we delve deeper into the issue, it's crucial to understand the statistics and data that paint a stark picture of the rent crisis. It's not just about numbers, it's about the people these numbers represent. Over the past decade, the rental market has seen a dramatic shift. Rent prices have soared to unprecedented heights. In many of our bustling cities, the cost of rent has doubled, even tripled in less than 10 years. This meteoric rise in rent has far outpaced inflation, and is significantly faster than the growth of the average American's paycheck. While rent prices are skyrocketing, wages have largely remained stagnant. Over the past 20 years, average wages have increased by a mere 3%. This disparity between soaring rent prices and stagnant wages has created a widening gap that is growing harder to bridge each passing day. The situation is even more dire for those at the lower end of the wage spectrum. For these individuals, a significant portion of their income, often more than 50%, goes towards rent. This leaves little room for other necessities like food, healthcare, and education. Despite the clear imbalance, the issue continues to go unnoticed, or is often brushed off as a problem confined to major metropolitan areas. However, data suggests otherwise. This is a nationwide crisis affecting communities big and small, urban and rural. It's also important to note that this crisis is not just about the inability to pay rent. It's about the stress, the fear, and the uncertainty that come with the struggle to keep a roof over one's head. It's about the unseen battle that millions of middle-class Americans are fighting every day. The numbers speak for themselves. The rent crisis is a growing issue that needs urgent attention. It's time for us to recognize this crisis for what it is: an unseen battle that threatens the stability and future of America's middle class. Let's not ignore the facts. Let's face them, understand them, and most importantly, act on them. The rent crisis affects more than just the middle-class bank accounts. In the shadow of the rent crisis, there's a hidden narrative that goes beyond the mere monetary implications. When we talk about the middle class, we often focus on the economic aspects. But the reality is, the effects of this crisis spill over into other areas of life. Take mental health, for instance. The constant strain of worrying about making rent can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. These are not minor afflictions, but serious health concerns that can affect every aspect of a person's life, from their work performance to their relationships. It's a ripple effect that, left unchecked, can be devastating. Then there's the issue of homelessness. While we may associate homelessness primarily with poverty, the truth is that an increasing number of middle-class individuals and families are finding themselves without a roof over their heads because of the unmanageable rent prices. It's a heartbreaking reality that shatters the illusion of stability that the middle class is supposed to represent. Lastly, we must consider the erosion of the middle class itself. The middle class has always been the backbone of American society, representing stability and upward mobility. But as the rent crisis continues to escalate, the middle class is slowly but surely being squeezed out. If the middle class shrinks or disappears, what does that mean for the American dream? The rent crisis is not just about dollars and cents. It's about mental health. It's about homelessness. It's about the very fabric of our society. It's a crisis that's eroding the foundations of the middle class, and with it, the promise of a better life. So, as we grapple with the rent crisis, let's remember that it's not just an economic issue, but a humanitarian one. It's a battle that's not just about wallets, but about people's lives and futures. The ramifications of the rent crisis extend far beyond financial strain. To understand the crisis, we must delve into the system that created it. We're talking about a system that has evolved over decades, a system that has been influenced by a multitude of factors. To get a clear picture of the causes of the rent crisis, we need to take a closer look at some of these systemic issues. Firstly, let's talk about the lack of affordable housing. It's not a secret that over the years, the cost of housing has skyrocketed, while wages have remained relatively stagnant. This discrepancy has created a situation where many middle-class Americans simply can't afford to buy a house or rent a decent apartment. The demand for affordable housing far outstrips the supply, and this imbalance is one of the key drivers of the rent crisis. Next, we come to gentrification, a double-edged sword if there ever was one. On one hand, it can bring new life and prosperity to previously neglected neighborhoods. On the other, it can displace long-term residents who can no longer afford the rising cost of living. As neighborhoods become more desirable, property values go up, and so does the rent. This forces many middle-class families out of their homes and exacerbates the rent crisis. And then there's income inequality, the elephant in the room. The gap between the rich and the middle class has been widening for years. While the top 1% see their wealth increase exponentially, the middle class is left to grapple with stagnant wages and rising living costs. This widening gap makes it harder for middle-class families to keep up with the rent, let alone save for the future.